Hello and a very warm welcome. My name is Munizae Jahangir and I'm moderating this session on behalf of Beacon House School. I'm a journalist and editor-in-chief of Pakistan's first digital media platform reporting on human rights issues, voicepk.net. And on behalf of Beacon House School System, the organizer of School of Tomorrow events, I'd like to welcome you to a world of tomorrow, 2020 and beyond. Towards happier futures, we all hope, the 13th edition of SOT events and the third one that is fully virtual. Now, the non-profit SOT event series was launched by Beacon House in 2000 as part of its CSR and to help inform the direction of the organization while also engaging global communities in conversations shaping the future of schools and societies. Now, let me introduce my guest today, this Sunday. She is the 26th Foreign Minister of Pakistan, twice elected Member of Parliament. Hina Rabbani Khar's term as Foreign Minister is best remembered for the regional pivot to Pakistan's foreign policy. And as the 26th Foreign Minister of Pakistan, she concentrated on building ties with Pakistan's immediate neighbors, especially India. We all remember her trip to India and how she, charmed the Indians at a time when things were very hostile. She led the journey of normalization of trade relations with India. And similarly with Afghanistan, Pakistan at that time also pursued a policy of reaching out to all political parties and ethnicities. And in a difficult time of increasing economic sanctions, Pakistan pursued to cement ties with Iran. Hina Rabbani Khar has also served as Minister of State for Economic Affairs for 4 years and Minister of State for Finance and Economic Affairs for another 2 years. And during these years, she was one of the lead person in Pakistan's economic diplomacy, both bilateral and multilateral. You will also have an opportunity to ask her questions in the later half of this program. And I will give you at least 15 minutes. So start thinking of your questions, shooting them out, and I'll be reading them out to her. And you'll be able to hear her and ask her questions directly through me. Not directly, indirectly. Hello, Hina, how are you? Hina, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm very well and good to be here. Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's begin first with the crisis in the Middle East. We would first like to have your immediate reaction to what has happened in Palestine. And what has your experience also been as Foreign Minister when dealing with this crisis?
Okay, so I think when I was Foreign Minister, the crisis brewed more in Syria and less in, Palestine was a constant at that time. And now Palestine has not been where it used to be even 10 years back. It's at a worse position. And I think the parallel between what is happening in Palestine and what has happened in Kashmir and continues to happen in Kashmir can just not be ignored by anyone who watches how things materialize and unfold. So in both places, you have a right-wing, rightist leader who wants to ensure that his constituency continues to look at him as the preserver and protector of the rights of that right. And in doing so, would usurp even further the right. I would not want to call the Palestinians a typical minority because in any sense of the word, they should not be. It was their land. So to call them a minority within their own land, but to the persecuted, to go full steam ahead and persecute them even further, and to really bring out an apartheid regime in all its forms, in all its historical contexts. So what Modi did in India vis-a-vis Kashmir and many other things, and what Netanyahu is doing and has been continuing to do and did in a very, very bold fashion in the last few months in Palestine is exceptionally similar. Their goals and objectives are also similar. And what is also interesting is that both these leaders are doing no favor to their nations, the nations that they claim they're wanting to take to various forms of glory. The only thing which in the case of Palestine and Kashmir, I think what it brings out in a massive fashion is the hypocrisy that exists in the protectors and supporters and carry forwarders of international human rights, states I'm talking about. I'm not talking about organizations. I think the organizations didn't do that badly. But the states who proclaim to be the upholders of human rights and who continue to lecture countries like Pakistan and African countries and all Asian countries on how to treat minorities, how to have similar treatment to the weak and to the so all of that comes and exposes them when it comes to Palestine.
But I'll also like to talk to you about the two-state solution, because I spoke to some human rights activists within Palestine at the time in Gaza, actually, when there was a full-blown artillery fire and rockets being showered on Gaza. And they said that for us, a two-state solution is still a reality. On the world stage, is it still a reality? Is it still something that is workable?
Look, Munizae, let's not be delusional. Okay, I think a lot has changed on the world stage vis-a-vis the question, and I'm not at all talking about the authenticity of that change or whether it was fair. But I think President Trump's efforts in the last, 2 years of his presidency, of his government, of his administration, to use the correct words, have dented the overall ownership of that by the world stage, okay, by many world powers. And I know that's likely to be a question that you're going to ask later about the role of the Arab states, but believe me, and I would, because sometimes, these personal experiences tell you a great deal. I was once at a broad international conference where a very senior Israeli representative was there, and I asked him the question that, what do you think is the impact of the Muslim countries not recognizing Israel as a state? And you know what the response was? He said, that is what we crave for. That is what has always held us back, and that is what has a huge impact on the psyche of the Israeli state. So when we let go of that also without taking anything in return, look, if you're doing it in a diplomatic setup where you've taken something and given something, I would say go for it, because we want a realistic solution which improves the life and the future of the people who are living in Gaza and the West Bank. But if you just do a giveaway without taking anything back, and we've seen what we've taken back, right? What we've taken back is enlarging the scope of their ammunition to attack and to really meam the kids and women and men and just not consider them humans. And finally, you have some recognition of it at the international stage in terms of the international press, from what you saw in the New York Times. And I think that's what the world needs to recognize. And I fear that we're moving not towards a brighter, more beautiful tomorrow, unfortunately. We're moving to a worse tomorrow, because today, even the most educated nations, even people that who are intellectual giants, who you and I come across as international conferences, when it comes to matters of religion and ethnicity, we're all proving Samuel Huntington right when he talked about the clash of civilizations. We have all gone back to our tribal roots. And when it comes to being attacked as a Jew or as a Muslim or, a certain ethnicity within that, we all come to support or to protect it without knowing or without realizing or without trying to understand what the rights and wrongs are. There are no rights and wrongs when it comes to it.
Let me throw you another question from what you have really said. Do you think that the media, you referred to the New York Times article where they put up all these children, all these pictures of these Palestinian children, and they said they were just children, of all the ones who were killed. Do you think that the media across the globe is breaking those boundaries, that perhaps they have become the voice of the new nationhoods, and nationhoods where nations are saying to their state that we are not part of this, and they are making alliances, whether they are in Pakistan or India or America, and it's the same kind of language, the language of the left, it is a language of the progressive liberals, it is a language of people who believe that it has to be beyond borders. Do you think that is being strengthened by social media and now perhaps even the mainstream media?
Okay, this is so interesting that you say that, because I could write a book on that, and I was actually thinking of at least writing a long article on that, because what is happening in the world, to me at least, is as states are being regressive, and I'm going to call them regressive, as states are abdicating their responsibility. By this, I mean important superpowerish states and all other, I would include many European states which are not superpower status, but have an important voice on the international forums when it comes to human rights, when it comes to international law, etc. as they are slowly and steadily abdicating that responsibility to voice the right, citizens of the world are taking that responsibility. And I think Black Lives Matter in America was a very big sign of that. What happened in India to some extent, yes, and you and I were all disappointed with how they did not come forward in a bigger way. But on the Palestinian issue, if you look at the streets of London, they were perhaps, more filled with people protesting than the streets of many Arab countries, perhaps even Pakistani streets, right? So the citizens of the world, in many ways, through social media, right and wrong, because there's also a lot of misinformation in the social media, and it depends on what you want to read, and you can continue to, because of that, only read what you want to read. And a little bit in the mainstream journalism, in the mainstream media, you saw a change this time. And believe me, Munizae, I believe a really big factor or a really big step that was taken this time. Many steps, yes, but nonetheless something that we can celebrate, that probably for the first time, because of the liberal voices within the US Congress, such as Rashid, such as AOC, etc. This question or this issue was seen from a completely different lens. For the first time, the Palestinian sensitivities, how they were being, butchered, how children were being butchered, came in. Even the information was not allowed, in some ways, to be spoken. So I think that, and there have been articles written, by the way, on the slight change in language that has been seen in the White House statement itself, which it talked for the first time, much as, I believe it's nothing much to celebrate, but it talked for the first time about equal rights for both in the future. And I have no love lost, or I cannot celebrate at all the role of the Joe Biden administration in this. I think he disappointed all of us immensely. Okay, and that shows that there are certain factors which will always remain tribal in many ways, okay, and clash of civilization oriented. But
tell me, you have been foreign minister.
Mm-hmm.
This impact that let's say civil society has or people have, do they have that kind of impact? Does the impact have the power to at least propel people or encourage them or encourage states to think in another way? Has that happened during your term, where there has been a certain reaction by the people and you have had to rethink your policy as foreign minister?
Okay, so this is a very interesting question, okay, because there are two things. I believe leadership is not about following the overall direction or the hysteria that is being created, but following the path which you think is right. So if you ask me to, give you an example of our times, with India, we followed the path of normalization of trade, even though it was not popular. So if we had listened to the voices from the streets, because we have shaped that narrative over years and decades of disallowing trade to be in the best interest of Pakistan, the streets will always tell you that that is not the way to go, right? No matter how much you try and shift it. So you do what you think is right. But the pressure that comes from the streets when the state is doing something which is, for instance, the US withdrawal in Afghanistan is in many ways a pressure which is coming from within the US that this has been a too expensive a war, too less has been. And we all remember the Vietnam War. The US did not pull out of Vietnam because they were killing too many people or because they had brutalized beyond what any state should be doing. They pulled out because they were losing their youth, because their youth and their university students came out in the streets. So eventually a state always responds to the pressure that is inward, that is coming from emanating from inside rather than pressure from outside. However, Munizae, let me say this uncategorically. I feel that all Western states and countries like India, who we thought were the Nehruvian India and the Manmohan Singh India and the Vajpayee India, all states have become much more crude in pursuing hardcore self-interest at the cost of what may come. Okay, and in many ways, all states have also become very disregarding of
immune. You think immune to
Pakistan also, don't you? I mean, when it comes to human rights issues, when it comes to minority rights issues, all states are becoming more right-wingish. Okay, India is a primary, brilliant example of it. And by the way, the interesting part is that many of these leaders perhaps realize, but still will take the chance of the fact that much of this poison cannot be reversed. And we know this from the Zia regime in Pakistan. And we know from the games that we played at the behest of the US with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan that once you let out these genies, it's very difficult to unroll it. It's very difficult for the state to suddenly decide, okay, now we've polluted their minds with, terrorist thoughts and extremist thoughts, but now we want them to be less extremist.
It's good that you're talking about Afghanistan, but before we go on to Afghanistan, there's one question I must ask you, which is that Pakistan is always questioned about its double standards. And we saw a little bit of that with our foreign minister, current foreign minister, Mr. Shah Mahmood Qureshi. He was even accused of being anti-Semitic and all of that. Firstly, what is your opinion on that interview?
Okay. My opinion is that it's interesting, because a lot of the world that we live in today is less about the reality on the ground or the correct and the incorrect and what becomes the narrative, right? So if you look at the word Semitic, what is the word? Where's the word coming from? It is anti-Semitic would be also anti-Arab, because Semitism basically refers to Arabs and Arabic and Hebrew and one or two other languages, all languages which are Afro-Asian descent. So, but anti-Semitism somehow has obviously become anything and everything which is said against the Jews. Now, it had a basis. It had a correct basis, because the Jews went through apartheid. They went through, Nazi Germany's time. They went through all of that. In order to protect a mistake of the past or history, you have now this notional anti-Semitism, which basically disallows, in their form, in how they would want to project it, for you to even say anything against the current right-wing Netanyahu government. Okay.
So from what I'm getting is that the current foreign minister didn't wield that question too badly.
Well, I think the current foreign minister would absolutely, perhaps in your and my lingo and what we understand it to be, did not say anything incorrect at all. However, because of the history of anti-Semitism, I think you should always err on the side of caution when you're in the international, places, to never, because you see, then you take the debate away from what is the real matter, which you want airtime on, and take it to anti-Semitism. That's not what we want. That's not what Pakistan's objective. Pakistan's objective is to draw the world's attention to the brutality and to the double standards of the world. Okay, Israel might be doing what it is. We don't have to call out. We have to call out the world and tell them, look, this is happening in your, in places where you have best ties with, and you're letting this go. So where will you be, or what space do you have ever to call us out? And Munizae, I know you want to perhaps ask the more relevant question, but I do want to sort of share with your audience and you that on the refugee question, as foreign minister, I could not go through a single delegation, whether it was American or any European country, even some Asian countries, who would lecture us on how to treat the refugees. Right? We saw what happened in the European states, including the UK. Barring Germany, every other country, when the Syrian refugees reach their doors. We continue to see what happens in the Mediterranean when those boats capsize and the people and children are allowed to drown. So the world will not, because of social media, because of everything else that has happened, the world order remains archaic, right? And the world's citizens have moved at a really fast pace, a lightning speed. And the catching up has not happened, and therefore there is an absolute disconnect.
That's very interesting what you say, and I think you're absolutely right there. But why also they ask us this question is because apart from Israel, we are another state that has been created in the name of religion. Sure. And we have the Rohingya Muslims here living in complete squalor in Karachi. Almost 5 lakhs of them, or over 500,000 of them. But we also have the Uyghurs here. Now, what is our arrangement of having the Uyghurs in Pakistan? Because when I interviewed them, they said that if the government of Pakistan finds out that we are here, we will be sent back to China. We are not given any ID cards or permanent cards that the Afghan refugees are given. And therefore, we have no access to jobs, other security, and right now, the anti-COVID vaccine. So what is our understanding with China regarding the Uyghurs, the Muslim Uyghurs that are now residing in Pakistan?
Okay, again, Munizae, I believe as much as you should talk about things that you know a great deal about, you should always tell the audience and yourself when that's a question that I'm unable to answer, simply for the reason that when we were in, so I would need to be in the room on a state-to-state discussion to be able to answer this correctly. And I can assure you that when we were in government, this was never an issue. This was really not anywhere. I don't remember it ever being discussed. So this is a issue which is of recent, making in some ways, has come to the fore recently. And I can tell you this much, that much and all, actually exclusively, all of the diplomacy and the questions, if ever we raise to the Chinese about our concerns about the Uyghurs, about anything else in China, would always be behind closed doors. And I do not disagree with that. I think that's a good way to conduct diplomacy. That's a very un-American way to conduct diplomacy. The Americans like to throw things through the New York Times, through the Washington Post, through think tanks, through, malign, name and shame. We've heard that before. Okay, neither the Chinese nor the Pakistanis, if they're left to their own devices, like to conduct their diplomacy like that. And I think that's the right way to go.
All right. Although the New York Times and the Washington Post do claim that they're very, very independent and they work beyond any pressure. Recently there was a briefing of sorts where journalists were informed that there are back channel talks going on between the intelligence agencies of India and Pakistan. Similarly, there are back channel talks happening between the top brass of the army, the intelligence agency, and Afghanistan. None of that has been brought to Parliament, and they do not intend to bring it to Parliament. What are your thoughts on those back channel talks? Because one of the things that is being said is that the economic ties will be kept as a priority. Kashmir, as far as it's concerned, of course, Pakistan will insist that Article 35A remains. However, the current situation whereby India, says that practically everything will be agreed upon as it remains now. Pakistan will not let up its stake on Kashmir. But there will be no more much of a hue and a cry. What is your take on these back channel talks? Is this a good idea?
Okay, I always think talks in any format, in any way, in any front, back, right, left channel is always a good idea, right? However, I also am a great big believer, and especially with the situation in Afghanistan unfolding, and pretty much every state repeating exactly the mistakes that they made in 88, 89, and prior to that, again, in exactly the same format, makes you wonder, do we ever learn our lessons from history? Okay? In this also, with India, Munizae, as foreign minister, this is a file I struggled with, right? And we tried to push as much as forward because it was part of our overall regional pivot, okay? Iran was part of it, China, already we were doing well, India, Afghanistan, all of them. Because we believe that if you were able to get the immediate neighborhood normalized, peace will come internally also. So, whereas I believe all channels are good, okay, and all talks. Let's learn from the Musharraf Vajpayee and then Musharraf Manmohan Singh, and then of course later on Manmohan Singh with us. Back channel diplomacy conduct, which led you to a paper which is almost signed. Okay, so it's a whole. It wasn't something that led to nothing. It's a pretty.
So what was signed? It's not clear. Was it just Siachen and Sir Creek, or what was ready to go?
In our times, I think Sir Creek or Siachen is always ready to go. I mean, all you have to do is say yes, and it's ready to go. And can you imagine the cost on our conscience when we had 164, more than 200 people die in Siachen, soldiers die in Siachen because of bad weather, because we are unable to talk?
What happened?
So basically what happened was that at that time, I remember Manmohan Singh Saab, who's somebody I really respect, gave us that offer a few years back when Pakistan came ready, and I was in that meeting with President Zardari, where we wanted to push it forward, and we had, of course, all our other entities almost on board also. And Manmohan Singh said, now the time in my country is not appropriate, and the sense in the street, etc. And I remember at that point, and I've said this in another interview also, saying to him as foreign minister to a prime minister of another country, who I do not consider to be, I don't like to use the word enemy with anyone, right? That Mr. Prime Minister, isn't the job of a leader to create public opinion which is good for the country rather than follow public opinion which may not be so good for your country? So there's always that element of, do you follow the street or do you follow?
What did he say? I'm sure people would want to know to that question of yours.
So he said yes, but the time has to be right. Let's wait for a bit. But waiting for a bit is what has always cost us. In my time as foreign minister, I read through many files. I read through the documentation that was done between Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, which was also initialed. Okay, on SOT. Now it could have been done that far back. Look at the cost of lost opportunities. So the lessons from history on that one is, on that back channel, India-Pakistan, is that please try and build some ownership of the people, because Musharraf talks were without any ownership, and then suddenly you let it come loose, and nobody was ready for it, neither the political entities nor anyone else. So it's important to, for instance, you're saying that the journalists were. I have not ever, I'll sit in Parliament, had any backdoor briefing by either the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, even as an ex-foreign minister, okay, or anyone else. Does that show how we conduct our diplomacy? I sit in the.
Let me ask you this question, because one of the things that was also we were informed about was that these back channel talks are part of. I mean, this is a normal routine. So during your time, were the back channel talks led by the intelligence agencies when you were foreign minister with India or Afghanistan?
I don't know how to put this, but I do want to say that when we were in the Foreign Office, when the Pakistan People's Party was in the Foreign Office, foreign policy, all of it was being led and conducted at the Foreign Office. And there was always a lot of give and take. There was a lot of consultation, which is the norm. The Americans do it, the British do it a bit less. The Americans' system very similar to ours, but the leading, direction would always come from the Foreign Office. Okay, and to just wrap this one particular question up, for instance, I think this says a lot. I sit in the Foreign Relations Committee. This back channel talks that you're referring to, and we have, by the way, not met for the last. I think we met, for the last 1 year almost. And when the chairman does a meeting, normally it's on what is happening in our schools being led, in a certain country. So very non-strategic in many ways, right? So what I'm saying is that if you are not going to build any ownership, and then suddenly the government comes out and say, oh, we have this thing with India. We've been cursing India the last 2.5 years, and we've been calling it our enemy, and we've said that we will never, come down. And I think, by the way, what do we need? We had an example in how they did that ECC approval of normalization of trade in some format, or opening up, certain imports from India. The finance minister coming and happily announcing it. Then the commerce minister, who happens to be the prime minister, who had approved that summary, asking the same finance minister that who allowed you to approve that summary, or to go ahead with it. Then the foreign minister of the country coming and telling us how it is not in our interest. So, at least brief your cabinet, or at least have one direction. If you're all going to be going in different directions. So a little bit of ownership is required. I am all for back channel diplomacy. And I think this normal, I used to always say to my Indian counterpart, who was Mr. Krishna, that we should be able to speak as normal human beings. When Pakistani and Indians are across the table, they stop acting like humans. They start acting like they have to protect, their sanctity and it's like you don't speak. And how can you not? So normalizing through, but Munizae, I am also very, very clear. If you do this without any take on Kashmir, and I'm not saying let's solve the Kashmir solution, but what they did in August, they have to undo that, partially undo that. They have to normalize that somehow. Because if Pakistan does not put its foot down over there, I mean, that has to be your red line. Okay, so if a country is not able to establish their red lines, this is the mistake we made with drones. If you're not able to establish your red lines, you will have no place, no space to stand on, and everybody will take you for a ride. So Pakistan, in normalizing trade, which is absolutely the way forward, as a personal citizen of Pakistan, I think you have to normalize trade, normalize contact between people.
All right.
And that's the way to go. But there has to be a take. You must be able to at least get the reversal of what they did.
So what was interesting was that during this briefing, it appears that one of the things that is of paramount importance is trade, because Pakistan, and you understand the economy very well as well, is in dire straits. Economically, Pakistan is not doing well. There's not enough money to go around. And by opening trade, you will actually open up the region for trade up to Central Asia. The question with that is, You have Kashmir, the situation as it is, and the Kashmir is still marching out against a very hostile, a very suppressive Modi government. And then you want to open trade. Which will come first? How do you deal with a situation where you have Kashmir under complete curfew and lockdown still, with people wanting basic fundamental rights, and you wanting to go forward with trade?
Look, my question to you, my counter question to anyone who's trying to do that is that where will be the credibility of the state of Pakistan if you try to do that? Are we to assume that everything that the foreign minister and the prime minister and everyone else said was to fool Pakistanis for all times? Because were we not told that what Modi has done in Kashmir has to be reversed for any normalization to take place? And if you're saying that without any of that happening, so we're not talking about a final settlement or a resolution of the Kashmir issue, but at least the reversal of what the Modi government did, which was also unprecedented, which is against their own constitution, which is against their own commitments of the Indian state to the state of Kashmir. Forget Pakistan, pre-partition.
What is the bare minimum we should expect them to do? A bare minimum.
Absolutely. Look, it's very important. We all operate in a social setup, right? Over there, your word matters. If Munizae is sitting with lunch with, for a lunch with me and telling me what she strongly believes and what she thinks she will never be able to move forward without that, and the very next day, you absolutely happily abdicate all of that and move forward, and the next day you tell me your red lines or you tell me you will not take it. Do you think I'm going to take you seriously? The states have even a more urgent sense of credibility because the state rests on its credibility, its reputation rests on its credibility, and Pakistan is a country which has enough immense reputational hazards as it is. Why do you want to add to the, and if will you be able to sell it to your people? So please be mindful that you are the one who raised, who was the one who asked everyone to stand outside of Foreign Office for 30 minutes? Who was the one who asked the Srinagar, the Kashmir highway to be renamed? So you do all of this jugglery, and then you think that all of a sudden you will come out and say, no, people, we were all wrong. Now the best way to go forward is whatever they've done in Kashmir, however they've conducted, whatever the re-annexation also we accept and we must go forward. No, I think it should be that the re-annexation has to be reversed. The timing of it can be according to the pleasure of the Modi government, right? But that reversal must be a prerequisite to go forward for you to be able to credibly take it forward and for you to be able to implement this back channel, whatever results come on. Otherwise, it will be like the Musharraf talks. Nothing will be implemented.
There are also back channels happening with Afghanistan. It's very important for us to ask you this question because you've been a woman foreign minister. And now my friends who are politicians, journalists in Afghanistan are calling me and saying that the situation is going to become very grave for women. We have already seen that the Afghan Taliban are now holding jirgas in Waziristan. There are media reports suggesting that they're doing that Waziristan is now really opening up. Whether that's true or not, we cannot ascertain simply because independent media journalists are not allowed to go there, to that area without permission. The question is, what kind of a blowback are you seeing from international troops moving out of Afghanistan, with the Taliban moving into some kind of a power sharing agreement? And it seems that Pakistan at the moment is backing the Taliban. What kind of a blowback will it have for our region, in particular for the women of Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Okay, first of all, anyone in Pakistan who has the notion of celebrating a Taliban takeover clearly is someone who has a very different future in mind for Pakistan. And clearly is someone who does not like to delve very deeply in history and the lessons from history. And these are not very, these are decades-old lessons. They're not centuries-old lessons, right? If there is an extremist, and make no mistake, no matter what you want to eulogize them as, the Taliban are extremist in many ways, right? And I think many of the accounts that I'm seeing lead you to believe that much may not have changed in their eventual behavior if they are able to do a complete takeover. Okay, so if you remember the Najibullah time of government, 88, the Soviet Union announced, 89, they were out. Similar things is happening over here by September 2021. All US troops will be out and whatever presence they have in any other form may remain. Now, I'm first of all very thankful that something that we pursued, we started, and I give credit to it for anyone and everyone who's been part of it. the previous government, our government, and this government, is that the fencing of the borders at all costs has happened. Okay, because Pakistan spent too much time not doing that. The first instinct of a state must always be that of self-preservation, which means you protect your own first. Okay, that having said that, I think this is going to be exceptionally difficult for Pakistan to manage. Okay, and my only suggestion is going to be that the Afghan government, in whatever form there is, must have full confidence of the Pakistanis, and the Pakistanis must have full confidence, and whatever engagement has to be done. And I understand that many people believe Ghani is not worth it, etc., but he is still what he is. Okay, so our interaction with all ethnicities, all entities, all political powers within Afghanistan must be very, very, very intense. And if anything, I think we can, if we can at all play the role, which I do not believe we can, because I think the world and within Pakistan, the notion of the control that Pakistan has on the Taliban is overly exaggerated. I mean, exaggerated to an extent which is beyond imagination. In my own time,
can you flesh that out a little bit? Because there is that perception, their wives live there, they have lived here. There's the Quetta Shura, they still live here. That's something that we have now, even we used to deny, but then we said now, yes, we do live, they do live here. Mullah Baradar was delivered by us. How is it that it's over exaggerated?
Okay, for the simple reason that the Taliban are probably smarter than all of us put together. Okay, and that they will use whatever needs to be used whenever it is their choice and their requirement to use it. But when they are in a seat of power, they will do as they choose without any notion of a sense of paying back or brotherhood or whatever benefits they might have taken. And I think history teaches us exceptionally important lessons on that count, right? Also, Munizae, more than anything else, where for me the breaking point, or the point where, this was many years back, I reached the conclusion that to rely on them is in many ways quite foolish, is their exceptionally close contacts with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and their inability and unwillingness, forget inability, their unwillingness to ever break those ties when Pakistan was being bombarded day and night by them. Okay, and even today, I think to make that distinction is perhaps in theory you can, in books you can, but in reality on the ground, to make that distinction as to who's been given which space in Nuristan and who's been protected where, it's all exceptionally complex and complicated. And I think the deeper you go into it, the more you realize how complex and complicated it is, how you cannot...
It's very important that what you have said, that they had very close ties with Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. That's extremely important what you have said. If that is the case, what is going to happen in Pakistan? Is there again going to be a reign of terror?
This is the problem, right? Because those people in Pakistan who think it's worth celebrating that the Americans have lost, and yes, I mean, nobody wanted long-term. I certainly don't think long-term troops presence in the region is a very good idea. It's a good idea at all. I think it will never normalize Iran. It will never normalize China. It will never normalize perhaps even Pakistan's relations with Afghanistan till there was immense international troops presence with Afghanistan. But the state that Afghanistan is going to be in and is going to grow into will have a huge impact in Pakistan. You cannot erase the footprints of the refugees, who have come in droves in Pakistan. And they are part and parcel of your society. It has an impact. All of this has an impact. So it will not bode well for Pakistan. Let me assure you, in my assessment at least, I can't assure you in terms of a predictive future for the worst, but in my assessment, that if there's a full takeover of the Taliban and by the way, the situation on the ground, I'm sure you as a journalist must know more than me, what you hear on the ground in the last 3-4 days, the recent attacks on students, now on teachers. Before that, apparently there's 6 active warlike post, situations as we speak, and things are not looking good. And then on top of that, I was just reading this account and of Pakistan not having finally sort of broken all ties with their NSA and not wanting to deal with them, and for good reason, because if in Afghanistan also, I think it's in all of this, one really important point also is, and that's been in my many years of experience with the Afghans, that the Afghans never take responsibility for what they do to themselves. They always want to put the responsibility on someone else. Okay. So, for instance, as an NSA, as a national security advisor, now if I represent Pakistan as foreign minister, I may hate a certain leader, okay, and I may hate a certain country, but I will always be mindful of the state that I'm representing, and that whatever comes out of my mouth is what is the state view, right? And not Hina Rabbani Khar speaking, but the foreign minister of Pakistan speaking. In the very same way, the national security advisor of Afghanistan is the national security advisor of Afghanistan. His personal views may be aside. Now, I have witnessed many events, international important events, where what would come out of his mouth would be completely opposite to the Afghan position, to the Afghan official position. Okay,
so perhaps you're referring to Amrullah Saleh.
Yeah, yeah, and many, he's one example. So this responsibility of the president of Afghanistan to take responsibility for what is his responsibility, for the NSA of Afghanistan to take responsibility for what is his responsibility, for the warlords, for other entities. But half of them, when the Pakistanis go to the room, they will blame the Americans. When the Americans go in the room, they'll blame the Pakistanis. And when the Europeans go in the room, they will blame both the Americans and the Pakistanis. So this game playing is not very useful to the Afghan cause also. And we know that there has a lot of misgovernance and a lot of open, barbaric corruption with aid money. Now that's not the Pakistan.
Schisms there, but let me ask you this question, because in one of the briefings we were also told, and the impression that we were given was that Pakistan's ideal situation is that the Taliban do not come into power to such an extent or in such big numbers that they are able to kind of make decisions completely themselves, unilaterally. That Pakistan ideally would want a stake of the Taliban in the next setup, in the next government, which will not be a full majority, maybe a minority. Is that a good idea?
Okay, I think micromanagement on the part of Pakistan is a terrible idea. And micromanagement in terms of ideas of how much power they should have, what percentage who should have, should be none of our business. And it is really very, very dangerous of us to say a thing like this, or to even, imagine a thing like this. And again, if we can happily all forget what our historical lessons are, let's go ahead and manage another Afghan government, right? That has never been in our favor. What you want to do is to manage state-to-state relations. Please, let's learn our lessons.
All right. So I don't want to hog the conversation here. There are some questions coming in. One of the questions is, should all the Pakistani political parties be on the same page when it comes to our foreign policy?
Obviously, when it comes to the economic policy and the foreign policy, all Pakistan governments, anyone who's ever going to make government, or Pakistan political parties must be on the same page. And by the way, let me assure you that is not at all impossible or even difficult to do. I remember when I was going to India, Munizae, you referred to that trip, my first trip as foreign minister to India. When I was going, I went to see the Prime Minister to take his blessings and to brief him and to be told by him to get his directions. And in my presence, he called each one of the political leaders in my presence. I waited there for 3 hours. He called each one of the political leaders, including the religious parties, and said that the Prime Minister is going there. We want your blessings. We want to normalize as much as possible. Now, when I went there, I stepped onto Indian soil with full confidence and authority, because I knew I was not only representing my government, I was representing Pakistan. I was representing all political parties in Pakistan. It enlarges your scope of diplomacy. It gives you confidence, and you're able to basically, and maybe it'd be a matter of books sometime, right? Which I read when we went in wasn't all rosy. That was all nice in the media, etc. But some of the meetings were exceptionally tough. I remember there was a common press, stakeout with us initially, and we had to convince them to even do that because they had some bad experience from the past. So it's diplomacy is all about. First of all, you have to have a vision, and I think it's quite possible it's quite possible, and you have to take your nation into confidence, and you take a nation into confidence by taking the political representatives into confidence.
But there is a perception here in Pakistan that there is a certain lobby or institution that is very protective about foreign policy, and that the politicians do not have full control of the foreign policy, whether it is President Zardari, Benazir Bhutto, as we saw, she was called a national security threat. So was Nawaz Sharif, and one of his um, actual skirmishes with the establishment was over India.
Yeah.
So, how do we change that? Do you think we can change that, or is the foreign policy more and more dominated now by this?
Okay, right now, I think I do not see a lot of, I do not see a strategic focus and a strategic vision coming forward, right? The simple answer to your not so simple question, Munizae, is that you become capable, you have a vision, you're able to articulate that vision, and you're able to put out a road plan to be able to implement that vision. And then you can coalesce everyone around it. You mentioned President Zardari. I was obviously, as president, he was a big force of guidance on the foreign policy. He had great interest, and he seemed to many times, if not always, point in the right direction. For instance, Pakistan did not become part of the Friends of Syria and uprooting the Bashar regime movement, which Turkey was part of, everyone part of, because he believed that this Arab Spring is going to quickly turn into Arab Autumn, and we actually saw that happen, right? So I can safely say, and I would not say it with this much confidence had I not served in the Foreign Office, that the Foreign Office is the only institution in the country which is capable of running your foreign policy in the right direction. Okay,
That's very
which
important.
has a 20-year plus vision. And if you are able to use that institution is the premier institution and has it in it to be able to. And I think I absolutely was, and I cannot complain in the 3 years that I was foreign minister that anyone else was leading the foreign policy of Pakistan.
Time is always short when I speak to you, Hina. But I'd like to squeeze in just a small question from the audience and, of course, from the organizers, that the central theme of this conference is 2021 and beyond, towards happy futures. Is there any prospect of a happy future conflicts around the world? I know you partly answered that question.
Yeah. So the perennial optimist in me, the indefatigable optimist in me would like to say, of course, yes, we are going in great places. But the realist in me who has learned, who observes things, I cannot say that we are moving in a direction which can bring a happier future, because I think the conflicts are likely to become more rather than less. I feel a big part of why the world is going in the wrong direction is the threat perception which is emanating from China, which is being perceived as an immense power struggle by the US. And in US's reaction to the emergence of China, the whole international world order, which is already on its tatters, which is already being, challenged by many, many fronts, is just it's just imploding in many ways, right? I think a lot of what is the conflicts which are allowed to sort of trigger off and have been created in the world are because of that big power struggle. If you see within our region, the hostility and the right wing Hindutva government in India, why are they being allowed to get away with murder in the international community within the US? Why does Pakistan come in the religious freedom index and Bangladesh comes and India doesn't? Because they believe it is containment of China policy to have India in there, and they will let India get away. So all of this has an impact, okay, and all of this makes everything more righteous, more extremist. And unfortunately, I honestly think that we have to live through a decade of trying to find a new, and this has always happened. After every 50 years or so, the world order needs some change, and there is a period of sort of a lot of instability. I feel the pandemic has only added to it, and we are living through that period right now.
Well, thank you very, very much for joining us on behalf of Beacon House. I thank you, and I thank the audience for, as usual, a very bold interview where you really spoke from the heart, making some very, very important observations and giving us some very important information. I'm sure this is a very valuable interview for those watching Foreign Policy. Thank you so much, former Foreign Minister Hina Rabbani Khar. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.